Hey everybody, welcome to Movement is the Medicine. This is our inaugural 2025 podcast. We did 18 podcasts last year and got off to a great start interviewing some of the top athletes in the country. And my relationship with Dr. Doug has just gotten stronger and better. And the Movement is the Medicine is here to deliver a message of the power that physical activity and exercise has on our lives, and why we should be investing our time and energy into bringing our kids along to the movement is the medicine style, where you move your body because it makes you feel better. It brings energy into your mind, body, and spirit. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to have our first show and our first guest. But first of all, I want to bring on Dr. Doug. Right. Doug, the expert.
And with 2025, I am moving again.
Yes, you are. Doug is back on 2 feet.
Because I'm finally walking after 5 months.
Yeah, it's been a challenge.
So movement is my medicine.
Yeah, it has been.
Game on.
For those of you who don't know, we've kind of lived through a pretty tragic episode of Doug cutting his foot severely and having to fight his way back, kind of practicing what you preach a little bit, right, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, this is a severely infected wound, 10 days in the hospital, 3 surgeries.
A lot of antibiotics. And, doing what I can, the important thing is doing what I could do while I was immobile. Mm-hmm. So doing things with my upper body, doing things with my stance. Yeah, because you look good.
Well, thank you. So, just did what I could, and it's just great to be walking again.
Well, in our experience with this show, we continue to talk about possible guests that could come on, and recently you mentioned that you had this relationship with former NFL quarterback Matt Gutierrez, and since he played for the Chiefs before, I was like, yeah, let's get him on. That'd be great. The more I dug into Matt's story, the more I realized that he's a testament to perseverance, resilience, and the ability to adapt to hardship. And I'm excited to have the conversation with Matt. You want to bring him on? That'd be great.
Yeah. So, with no further ado, here's Matt Gutierrez.
Hey, Matt.
Joining us from the Bay Area.
Welcome, dude.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you come on, and as I kind of told you in the build up to the show, we focus on making sure that people understand the power that physical activity and exercise and sports has played in our guests' lives. And as we go through your life, we're going to talk about that as a thread. But first of all, I just kind of want to talk, initially, you met Dr. Doug in California as you were helping someone deliver some furniture for him. Well, is that kind of how the story goes? You were kind of a...
Yeah, I work in the commercial real estate business, and an old friend of mine that I knew before I was in this business works in the furniture space, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I met this great group of folks. They're doing something really cool. I don't really know how to explain it, but I think you need to come check it out." And he knew that I was involved in sports and coaching kids at the time, and so he said, "Yeah, you should really come along and meet these guys." So initially, I did not know that Dr. Doug was there. I had heard about this guy named Mark that Dr. Doug was working with, and just went along to pretty, inconspicuous industrial building in Mountain View. And when we went in, it was just like, wow, I couldn't believe what they were doing. And I immediately saw the value to, everybody from my old colleagues that were playing professional sports all the way down to the little kids that I was working with. So I just immediately knew that I didn't know where the model was going to go or how they were going to build an actual business around it, but I knew that what they were doing was valuable to athletes, and I really saw that, there's a lot of people that can benefit from this.
Yeah, as I've watched Doug, kind of move this thing down the road and figure some things out in terms of how to commercialize the thoughts and processes, I continue to learn more and more about how the fundamentals of what he is doing could ultimately change the way we handle athletes, not just elite athletes, right? All athletes.
Well, the developing athlete, right? Because there's so much that's happening there as you're growing, right? And becoming athletic and moving. I think for every pound of body weight, 5 pounds of body weight, and as you grow, your mechanical sequencing is changing.
Yeah.
So that's where we come in, and we're really excited to help athletes have greater opportunity from a development standpoint. I think, when I met Matt, when he came in, I was like, oh, this guy's 6'4". he's pretty fit. I mean, what sport did this guy play? We're talking, and he shared his journey with me, and it was just fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think Matt, is a great example of from a throwing perspective,
right,
someone who is incredibly effective. I mean, one of the top quarterbacks coming out in his class as a senior. Heralded, high school. I think you guys were undefeated, right, Matt? For
151 straight games,
right? Unbelievable.
Let's we're going to go back. Let's go back. You grew up in Concord. I want to. We always. This is kind of the method. We go back to the early days of learning to play and what it meant, how sports played a role in your early life, and was. Growing up in Concord, unique experience. It's East Bay, right? It's from what I heard in another podcast I listened to about you. Your dad was a hard worker. He busted his ass so that you could play. Is that right?
Yeah, both my parents. My parents worked and worked hard, and I think my dad, from an early age, was a big influence on me and I have a little brother. Me and my brother, as far as sports go, and it was a part of his life. From a young age as a fan, and also playing competitively and then recreationally as an adult. So, we'd grow up watching him play softball and going to his adult men's league basketball games and watching him compete. But above all of that, he was a huge local sports fan. So. We grew up on the 49ers and San Francisco Giants, even though we lived in the East Bay, which is
close to
nearly
Oakland.
Adjacent to Oakland, where the A's and the Raiders were at the time. And we only rooted for the Warriors that played there in Oakland. And my family mostly came from San Francisco, so everybody's diehard San Francisco sports fans, and that's how we were raised. And it just happened, at that time, the Niners were in the midst of establishing their dynasty in the late 80s and early 90s. So we had a lot of great football to watch and people to root for, great players to root for. And then on the San Francisco Giants side, they weren't really winning championships at that time, but we had a lot of great players, namely Barry Bonds. So there was a lot to see, a big attraction to come out to the ballpark. Even when I was much younger, Matt Williams and Will Clark and some of those guys before Barry got there. So there was a lot going on in the Bay Area sports scene, and we were immersed in it. And, I can remember being a little kid sitting and watching the ball games with my dad, Niner games, and really football was his favorite sport. And so that kind of became, kind of an important thing in our household. And not just in our home, but throughout my family. People were involved with sports, and especially football, was a major point of interest. So from a young age, it was just kind of a part of our life. And
was it like me, where whatever season it was, that was your favorite sport? Did you play multiple sports?
Yeah, I did. I'm 40, so I grew up, in the 80s and 90s. I guess video games were coming around, but we still played a lot of arcade games. And, I think it was, I was probably into grade school before we had any type of console or anything in my house. So I pretty much grew up an outside kid. I still considered myself an outside kid. And so, it was, whatever season it was, we were going out pretending to be Joe Montana or Steve Young in the backyard, or baseball season, we're trying to be Matt Williams at third base or Will Clark. And that's kind of how I grew up. And I played basketball, baseball, and football. I ended up dropping baseball, big mistake in my life.
You probably would have been a pretty good pitcher.
Yeah, I think I had some skills that could have lent value to my high school team, especially. And we had a great program at that time, a lot of buddies that played. So I wish I would have kept it going, but at the time it was just really in conflict with what I was trying to do in football, the off season. So that's kind of how that unfolded. But yeah, as a young kid, we tried to do as much as we could, and we were always outside. If my dad had the time, he'd be outside playing catch with us or shooting hoops. And then my brother's 2 years younger than me, so once he kind of got old enough to run around and walk, we were always outside playing wiffle ball or throwing the ball around or beating up on each other. So
De La Salle High School's only been around for 50 years. You were one of the early classes, right? But
Well, yeah, I think they were founded in '68 or '69,
Right.
and maybe even a little before that. But yeah, it's a fairly young school when you think about
Right.
private schools, especially here in the Bay Area. And I think shortly, maybe within 10 or 15 years, as they were getting off the ground, they hired Bob Ladisor, I believe, in 1979, who was
Right.
the head coach that built the program and the prominence, along with a couple of other figures. Terry
All he did was win.
yeah, no, and it didn't start that way. They were. It's funny because a lot of my uncles, my dad, my uncles went to public schools in the area, and they joke about how they used to beat up on De La Salle when they got a chance to play him back in their day. But the tides
rights.
turned, and it started to happen, I think, pretty quickly during the '80s. And people don't talk about this much because the program wasn't nationally recognized at that point. But we had some pretty outstanding players that came out of the program at that time.
Doug, you might know this. But, I'm sorry, Matt. You might know this, but I'm going to challenge Doug. Who's the most famous KU Jayhawk that played for De La Salle High School basketball?
Ooh, good one.
Wow.
Won a national title. Had 14 points against K-State on their way to the 1988 title run, led by Danny Manning.
You stumped
Come on,
me.
Doug, you're a hooper.
I
Come
know.
on.
I mean, you
You know-
stumped
you
me,
know
though.
these guys.
Scooter Berry. So the Berries
Scooter
all went
Berry.
to De La Salle.
Wow.
Drew Berry, Scooter, and we're professionals.
Oh, wow.
There you go, Scooter
Amazing.
Berry.
Well, you learn something every day.
Yeah, and interesting that you bring up Scooter because I just went in October, I believe it was October. He got inducted into our high school Hall of Fame, and him and I've met Scooter a couple times over the years, but I had some other buddies, and our basketball coach, a gentleman named Frank Alaco, was inducted in the same ceremony. So
Okay.
I got to see Scooter and hear a beautiful speech that he gave, and kind of get back in touch with his era at De La Salle.
Well, it must have been a pretty cool high school and environment and game night, Friday Night Lights, that whole deal, and to be the starting 6'4" quarterback. Did you live the dream? I mean, did you date the prom queen or the homecoming queen? Was it everything?
Yeah, I mean, it was everything that I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And that I thought it would be. I don't know about that part of it. I think we had a really good social life and a fun time. But
Sure. It was all boys too, right?
So we have 1,000 boys, and then
Yeah.
we had a school of about 800 ladies across the street.
Okay.
And so it was different administrations, but kind of like one school. We did a lot of we took, I guess, 2/3 of our classes were co-ed. We did all of our lunches and recesses co-ed, and then I think once you're a sophomore or junior, you start having classes together, and then all of our social events and
Right.
things like that were done jointly. So,
Yeah.
but there was a benefit, I think, to being, your freshman, sophomore year kind of sequestered in the classroom to only boys, where you could just kind of not worry about the girls and be yourself a little bit more. But generally, I think, De La Salle is an interesting place in that the time I was there, they were really just kind of coming into the national scene and getting a lot of media attention. So there's really a very personal kind of family feel to the place. It's small, and all the administration, knew your family, knew your parents, and it's kind of a small community. So I didn't feel like it was, we were treated like, what you might see in the movies or anything like that. We were just a part of something really, really unique and special at a unique time, at a particular time in history where that program was really hitting its stride. And I always say I was kind of born at the right time, because
Sure.
I went to school there at that, during that era, and then I played with some amazing athletes that were there that kind of made our teams great. So
It's interesting, Doug, because one of the things that the Aspen Institute has identified in their Project Playbook is when they talk about the challenges that we face with youth sports, is one of them is we've lost that small town feel, that community feel for youth sports. We've professionalized it in such a way that kids cross boundaries, and you don't have that community feel like you're talking about. And the value of that is can't be lost. But we've lost it.
Right. No,
Yeah.
I mean, you
No, I
just see
agree.
it
And
across the board.
I know that it's hard to create that now with the way the world is.
Yeah.
But I think if there's any way for a coach or a community to do that, it's valuable not only because of the character that it builds, but these are relationships that I still have to this day with a lot of people that I experienced De La Salle with or played ball with. And, I don't think that's overly common nowadays for people to still have friends from when they were in high school or close friends. And I think a lot of it comes from that unique experience.
You know, what's interesting now, my 8-year-old son is playing soccer on the local school team, Prairie Village.
Sure.
And he was being asked to join a club team.
Right.
Well, he wants to play with his friends.
His friends.
From school on that team, and I love that. So I'm like, just keep playing with your friends, having fun, just enjoying it,
I'll share something with you after the show that you'll find interesting. But Seth Curry and his wife funded a study, a community report that was done by the Aspen Institute about Oakland. And it talks about the problems that exist in the Oakland community about this. And it speaks directly to that sense that we've lost it. And social media and phones and kids know everybody. My son, who's 16, he hangs out with more kids from other schools than he does with his own friends. And then you get this travel team thing and driving kids. It's really something that I think you're right. We need to find a way to address it. And because one of the things I think that you experience with your community, as you talked about it, is people knew you, like they knew you as a person, and they held you accountable to a certain sense of who you were as a person and an athlete and a man. And we've lost that. We've lost that ability to hold people accountable.
Well, I think if I could kind of connect the dots to my experience at De La Salle and why I think that's important, not only the administration, the faculty there, but particularly the people that they had there as the athletics coaches, and not just the ones that you would know as the head coaches, but all the way down the staff. These people weren't highly paid, right?
Nope.
I mean, they were there because they loved it. It was a life mission for them and a passion for them to teach the games and use the games as a vehicle to build character and teach young people about life. And I think, just listening to you guys describe some of these issues and observing them, in my experience, I think, like a lot of things, money changes them, right? And in my experience growing up in youth sports, whether it was my dad or some other, father from the community, they were volunteering their time and trying to make that experience as good as it could be for the kids, right? And I think the crux of it is, what is youth sports supposed to be about, right? Is it about the game and, getting NIL money and getting followers and all of that? Or is it about using this apparatus or this vehicle or structure to compete, but also to forge character and learn about life and learn how to be on a team and learn how to compete? And so I think the angle that, society was looking at sports or using youth sports has changed a little bit and, or a lot of it. But I think for me, that was the main difference. I don't even to this day, I don't think that coaches at De La Salle are paid much of anything for the coaching aspect of what they do. And I think it comes from the right place. And I think that's why the experience and the messages have lasted as long as they have.
Yep. Wish you could bottle it up. So your journey from De La Salle and the challenges that you faced, you were prepared for those because of the foundations that were laid prior to getting to Michigan and then having to transfer and suffering a pretty severe injury to your throwing shoulder. Talk a little bit about were you pursued by more than one major college? How did you choose Michigan? What did people think of Matt Gutierrez coming out of high school? You were like the top quarterback in the nation, weren't you?
I think I was.
Oh, you got somewhere to go? I'm sorry,
Matt. Before we go there, can I just get perspective on something? So
I love it.
Sure.
Where the program was when you were there at De La Salle, can you just talk about breaking into that starting role at De La Salle? Like, what year was that in the school? What was your mindset at that time? And then as you progressed through that role, how did your mindset change, or how did you have to evolve your mindset?
Great question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Doug. So for me, I'll go back even a little further. So I have my godfather has a nephew that's 10 years older than me, and we're all even though we're not blood, we're all very close, like family. And so I grew up going to De La Salle games, watching him play when I was like 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And although De La Salle wasn't quite nationally known at that time, they had an amazing program. And they already had a streak going. This was like at the end of the 80s into the early 90s. So like 90, 91, I'm 6, 7 years old going to the games. And they had got, Amani Toomer, I don't know if you guys remember that name, who actually spent time with the Chiefs in training camp in his last year.
Yep.
But I think he's all-time touchdown leader for the New York Giants, or something like that. But he was at De La Salle at that time, a couple other big-time guys. So I'd been going to the game since I was, 5, 6 years old, and really aspired to play there someday and go to school there. And so that was always what I had in the back of my mind. And I don't think I knew that it was, even a possibility or the sacrifice that my parents would make to make it happen. But it's just what I wanted to do. And so in my mind, I was just kind of following the path and following the dream. And my parents were able to send me to a football camp after 8th grade. So during the summer, I think before freshman year. And I went out there and I was big. So they gave me a lineman's helmet. I remember I had the big fish face mask, with the bar down the middle. And then I went to the quarterback drills and I started throwing the ball around, and the coach was like, "Wow, this is kind of different, right?" I was already, pretty big in stature, 6'3" or something like that, wiry. And so one thing that I had observed is that like a lot of the really good players at De La Salle played on the JV team as a freshman. So if the coaches saw something in you and you physically could handle it, they would move you up and try to advance you. And so that was like a goal in my mind, but I didn't know how it was really going to be possible.
Right.
And so I was thrown around at the camp, and then from that kind of came the discussion like, "Hey, where are you going to go to school? Like, where are you headed?" And I said, "Well, I'm going here, coach." And so they didn't even know, they didn't know who I was. And I just showed up at camp. So after that, they were kind of like, started talking about, "Hey, should we move him up to JV?" And part of the reason was that they had a varsity quarterback that was a senior that year. And the incumbent coming up to JV was a year ahead of me in school, and he was a great athlete. He played AAA professional baseball for many years, really good athlete, but he wasn't necessarily a pure quarterback. He was just a really good athlete, and that fit because we ran the veer. We ran the ball a lot with the quarterback, so he was going to do a great job. But I think when I came in and they kind of saw that I had this ability throwing the ball, and then, I was very exuberant about the game and really into it, they thought, okay, maybe we can use both of these guys. So they moved me up to JV. We both played quarterback, traded time. And I think over the course of that year, we both kind of figured out like, okay, quarterback is something that maybe I can excel at. And he was going to excel at other positions and play baseball. And so then basically what I'm getting to is that timing, played a huge factor. There was a gap there where they didn't have a guy that was already starting or something like that. There was going to be a new starter either way. And so they put me into the fold. And part of the reason that I think everyone got comfortable with that was because we had so many other good players on our team. And I'll just, reel off a couple of names that you guys may recognize from the years past. But DJ Williams was the #1 recruit in the country. He played at Miami. He was a first-round pick to the Broncos.
Linebacker.
He was our running back and linebacker that year. Next to him at running back and linebacker was a guy named Kevin Simon, who was a parade All-American, played at Tennessee, drafted by the Redskins. We had Demetrius Williams, Oregon, played in the NFL for quite a while. Derek Landry, I think, played 9 years in the league.
Wow.
And then, outside of that, we had some other guys that played college ball, but more so just a lot of great character guys.
How old was Maurice Jones-Drew?
So Maurice is 1 year behind me.
Okay.
So he didn't join my team until the following year.
Got it.
But in my first year, I was just a sophomore, and we had a lot of good players around me that could kind of take that pressure off.
Wow.
And then, so we played 2 games, first couple games of the year where we kind of stuck to our program of running the ball a lot, handing off to DJ. And we had the third game of the year, we were playing Mater Dei from Santa Ana, who Matt Leinart was the quarterback. He was a junior that year. We had a great program. We knew it was going to be a really stiff opponent for us. And we knew that we could throw the ball, but they didn't know that because, we hadn't thrown the ball in the games, or, they hadn't seen me on film from the year prior. So they loaded up the box and put everything in the stop and the run, and we ended up going over the top for 6 touchdowns that game, throwing the ball. And so I think it was kind of that, we already knew as a team who we were and what we were capable of, but I think having an opportunity to go out and do it in a big game on the field, and then for me to have a chance to bring my value throwing the ball, right. Which was kind of new to what, how we would threaten the defenses. I think that was kind of definitely a big moment for me personally and for our team, but for me personally, and kind of a turning point where there was a lot of eyeballs on that game. And from that point on, there was a lot of schools, reaching out. And,
I don't mean to put you on the spot, and I'm not trying to challenge you or anything, but were you jealous of Matt Leinart and the attention that he got, and the fact that he went to USC to be the starting quarterback? Was there any sense that you were better? And
No. I was super pumped for him.
Good.
I got to meet Matt and got to know him through the Elite 11 stuff and playing against him. And so,
sure.
Seeing what he went on to do at SC was amazing. And even at Michigan, I remember him. I was kind of lined up to start in 2004 before I got injured, and Matt had already had a great year. I think the year prior, right. If I remember correctly. Maybe I'm off one, but I remember talking to him before the season, and we were both kind of going in, getting ready to have big years and talking to him. So I always liked to see guys, that I knew or played against go on and do great things. That was always really fun for me. And I think I share that with all my guys at De La Salle. We were all about people excelling and getting to see them. And it kind of validates what we accomplished too, right? It's like, hey, we were able to have some big victories and look at these great players that were on the other side.
Right. So you faced adversity at Michigan, and you didn't start when you thought you were going to. Was there discouragement? Did you go through depression? Did you feel it mentally and emotionally? Did it hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was definitely a challenge. Just everything building up to that point, gearing up for it. I'd been a backup for 2 years. I redshirted, and then I was a backup for a year, and so you're just you're constantly competing. And I was starting to see some of my classmates, guys that I'd come in with, get opportunities on the field. And that was, for me, that was the biggest letdown, was like, wow, I was really looking forward to this opportunity to get out on the field on Saturdays and compete with all my buddies. And, then I wasn't able to do that. So that was the biggest letdown, was not being able to share that experience with them.
Right. Do you want to share like what happened there, Matt, in terms of like why you weren't able to start that year, just with regards to your mechanics and things that were done there? Do you want to share a little bit of that?
Yeah, sure. I can get into it.
Who was your coach?
Lloyd Carr was our head coach.
Oh yeah, I don't remember. Lloyd Carr.
Yeah, Lloyd. Yeah. So it kind of goes back to high school, actually. So when I was in high school, I broke my wrist. I had a fractured scaphoid and had a screw put in it on my throwing hand, and so that was ahead of my junior year. Ahead of my junior year. So I think I played the entire junior season with a broken wrist, and then I ended up getting it repaired after the year. So I think I kind of started to manipulate the way I threw a little bit during that time, a little bit different. And so when I got to college, my coach, there was something that he thought he could help me improve, right? I don't know exactly what that was, but he was trying to help, offering me ideas about changing this or changing that.
Right.
And ultimately, I think it wasn't productive for me. And the intention was there, it was good.
Right.
But the way I interpreted the information or put it into practice, I think put my body in some vulnerable positions. And, looking back, I didn't realize it at that time, but I look back at, a couple of videos and you see you're looking at a 20-year-old kid or a 19-year-old kid that's like, entering the prime, you're just starting to train, you're lifting, you can see the physique starting to develop. And I'm like, man, I was pretty pretty physically developed and strong and explosive, and realizing that my body was out of sync. And I think that put a lot of pressure on, parts of the body where there shouldn't have been pressure. So, or stress. So that led to.
Well, Doug, you see this a lot, right? Like when people come back from injury, they focus on the injury and getting that better, and they neglect the rest of the things that are happening around the injury, that maybe the injury is even causing more opportunity for damage.
I mean, you could, first of all, you mentioned, Matt, like everybody comes from a place of wanting to help and contribute, right, and make things better. And that was certainly the case here. You could see the trajectory of the hand injury could have changed, some of the throwing mechanic just from a compensatory standpoint.
Sure.
I mean, he's a great athlete, so those little compensatory strategies would still make you very effective, but maybe built in
figured out a way to make it
some habits that really, once you're healed and healthy, competing at a greater stage, a greater level of competition, could have been things that they wanted to maybe refine and try and make more efficient.
Sure.
So it would have been interesting to really, take a look at the two throwing mechanics side by side, and I'm hoping that's something that we can do. Matt and I have been talking about this for quite a while.
Okay.
But yeah, I think, ultimately, if I look at an athlete,
I mean, he's only 40 and he looks damn good. He probably could find a roster to.
Exactly. America loves a comeback. So, but I think if I see a young athlete and they have something to their throwing mechanic that is unique to them, what I try to do is say, okay, let's take a look at this throwing mechanism. Let's see its efficiency, and can we build the infrastructure around it to even be more stable, more dynamic, and more effective with what they're doing, especially if they're coming from a non-injured perspective.
Right.
So Chad Hennings go ahead.
I was just going to kind of round out the story for you guys. So, and I'll get to Chad too. So, this is all happening the year that Chad's coming in as a freshman, as a true freshman. So I'm going to just lead into 2004. John Navarre was our starter. He had graduated. We had another gentleman who was a stud of an athlete named Spencer Brinton, who had transferred in after starting 2 years at San Diego State. And then he went on his Mormon mission, transferred into us. But he got hurt the year before in backup duty, got hit in a game, blew his labrum out, and this guy could really, really sling it. But he was never the same after that. So now that opened up an opportunity for me to come in and be the backup in 03, and then try to make a run at starting in 04, which I think was going pretty well until I was in a workout, shorts and T-shirt, I think in July, in our field house, and I had a workout throwing around, went really well. And we were just at the end. I remember distinctly working on checking down to the left, throwing like a 3 or 5 yard flat route. And I felt like a truck had, someone tied my arm to the bumper and that thing took off, is what it felt like. And it's just a 20 or 30 yard throw out to the flat. And so I felt that, but I kept throwing and kept on in the workout and finished well. And I didn't really know anything was wrong, but in the following days, I just wasn't throwing the ball quite as well. So from that day, there was like a gradual decline into training camp where it got to the point where I could throw the ball as hard as I could, and it would just be like a balloon, like 20 yards, And they didn't really know what was wrong. So I tried to rehab for a few weeks, but all this time we're leading right into the season, right? So that's how Chad came in and had, probably, I think people would say, a historic year as a freshman, starting at Michigan, and led to his great career there.
Right.
But that's kind of how my injury happened, and then I ended up having surgery a few weeks after the season started to repair a posterior labrum tear.
So his success on the field led you to question whether or not you wanted to stay at Michigan. Did you have someone helping you make a decision to transfer, and what was that like for you? What did you lean? Is there someone you lent on? Did they help you make the decision? How did that happen?
Yeah, it was. I would say it was a combination of family and I would say mostly family. Of course, we consulted with the coaches and the doctors and all that. And my dad may have done some, taken on some consulting from other folks elsewhere that I didn't know about, but most of it was just consulting with my parents and family. But at the time, there was no transfer portal. I had a couple years left of eligibility. My parents are very keen on education and, not wanting to put all the eggs in the sports basket. So that was one of the reasons I went to Michigan. It's an unbelievable academic institution. And so I didn't want to sacrifice that part of my life by leaving early. And so I also, I'm a competitor, and I thought, of course, loved Chad, knew he was a very talented player. He had a great year. We had a great season as a team, ended up going to the Rose Bowl that year. And so I knew that the odds were against me to unseat him. But of course, the coaches tell you it's going to be a competition and all those things. And they want, we want you here and all that stuff. So I thought, all right, well, I can, I have as good a chance here as any as accomplishing the things that I want to accomplish versus going somewhere and sitting out for a year. Then I have only 1 year to play and all those things. So I thought, I'm going to write it out, come back, see if I can get healthy and perform at a high level again. So that's what I did. We ended up having a tougher year that year. I think it was in 2005. I think we lost like 5 games, which at Michigan at the time was not acceptable.
Yeah.
And again, not acceptable. But I thought we had a great team. And again, I was really having a hard time not being able to be out there and compete with all my buddies. And I only had 1 year left. And I thought it's really a tough spot as a QB when only one guy is playing and you're buddies with the guy who's playing. And essentially you're waiting for something bad to happen for you to get an opportunity. And I didn't like that feeling. So I think it makes the most sense for me to find an opportunity somewhere else for a year. And of course, Chad had established himself and was doing great things. So it just made sense for everybody.
That's got to be pretty common in the game, in the quarterback, kind of specifically the quarterback role, because all the other positions are pretty interchangeable. The quarterback is, if the guy's starting and he's succeeding, you're not going to get your shot, and so you're kind of caught behind the 8 ball a little bit. That's interesting. I have never really put it in that perspective in my head, but I think about Jalen Daniels for the KU Jayhawks coming back next year, and he's pushing all of those quarterbacks back a year. That were thinking that he only had 1 more year. Like how'd he get another year? Like he got another year. Like, are you kidding me?
I can't even imagine these days. I mean, you see it, right? You see the guys jumping ship after a year.
Yeah, Will Howard. I mean,
Will Howard or Brock Ewers, right? He was at Ohio State for a year. You see guys, and you can't blame them, right? Guys are chasing opportunity and kind of looking out for number one, which in today's day and age, it's hard to blame them. But I think it's showing itself now, right? I think it would have been very similar at the time I was playing if you had the freedom to transfer laterally. I think we would have saw a lot more of that then too.
Of course, yeah, for sure. But so you did transfer and you did succeed, and in 2007 you still went undrafted, but you were good enough. Did you know you were good enough? Did someone have to tell you were good enough? Did you go to the combine and show you were good enough? How did you get to the point where someone was able to sign you, like the New England Patriots?
Yeah. I always knew I could compete. I felt like I had competed well at Michigan. I knew I could play at the level with those guys.
Sure.
I was seeing by that time, a lot of my peers were getting drafted and playing in the NFL. So I knew that I could compete and play well at that level. Coming back from the injury, and even when I was at Michigan, I was always battling myself internally because there was this feeling and this ability that I had, growing up and in high school, where I was always the guy that could, throw the hardest, or amongst the guys that could throw the hardest, and I could chuck the football very naturally without thinking about it and all that. But once I got injured, all these other thoughts and things started coming into play and into my mind, and I never felt the prowess, I guess you would say, that an elite thrower feels, or that I felt growing up, where it's like, hey, I can just pick any ball up and rip it with the best of them.
Right.
That had become a challenge and something I was always battling with. So I knew that I had the physical gifts and the ability to compete, but I was always searching for and trying to prove, like, I'm not just a guy that has the ability to make it, but I was trying to regain the prowess of this skill that I remembered having, because I knew that would elevate me another level in terms of competing at the professional level, I think. So
that cognitive piece, Doug talks about that cognitive piece all the time. Like that's almost 50% of it, right? Like getting back the confidence.
I think maybe even more. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe even more, right? I mean, because you said, Matt, very well. I mean, you had the physical capabilities, you had the skill set, the mentality to compete, but that one facet of what really, allowed you to excel throughout your career was something now that was just not where it had been. And battling against that, that must have been a tremendous, internal battle. But still being able to actualize, your dream, right, of making it to the pros is just a testament to, how good of an athlete you are. So
when you first, thank you. Yeah, it was it was a battle, and I equate it kind of in my mind to somebody that, is, and of course we all have friends that have been through this, right? A guy's the fastest guy growing up, and then he blows a knee out, and less so nowadays, but back in the day, hey, maybe he never runs the same again, right? And it can affect what type of player you are if that's one of your biggest assets. And for me, throwing was a thing that I always had a gift for. And being a quarterback, right? It's kind of table stakes. So, and there's definitely different levels to throwing ability and passing ability. And for me, I needed that to be elite for me to compete at an elite level with the best guys in the world. And I think I had it at one time, or I had the foundation for it at one time, but after getting injured, and it was also at the time when two things were happening. I think there was a lot more interest and information and ideas and opinions coming out about how to throw the ball.
Right.
And my layman's hypothesis is, at that time, call it in the 90s, 2000s, technology is advancing to where you could really slow down video and get into the digital age and go frame by frame. And so people were essentially over-analyzing what the human body was doing throwing, and throwing all these ideas at people about how you can improve and all that. You give that to a 19-year-old kid who's chasing their dream, at University of Michigan or whatever school. Like, I was eating that up. I couldn't get enough of it. Mm-hmm. And anything that I was hearing that I thought could make me better or give me an edge, I was all about it. So I was really, really eager to learn and try to adopt any of those things that were being offered to me. And of course, you're hearing stuff from a coach at Michigan or SC or Ohio State. You're thinking, hey, these guys are preaching gospel, right? Like, they know. Right. And again, I think the intentions are always in the right place, but sometimes, it was early in the game. We don't know if that information is correct or not. So it's just kind of how it unfolded.
You're wise. You're just so wise. Are you interacting with quarterbacks today at any level? You have so much to share.
I think it's important to mention that I didn't have a lot of these realizations until, some of them even recently.
Sure.
Right. And a lot of it came from, looking back and analyzing, and also working with kids and learning and understanding how the body works, and reflecting back on what I was feeling during my experience, or what I was seeing on tape from myself, or things that I was trying and what positions that put my body in, and kind of, I guess just figuring it out. And there's a piece in there that we're leaving out that kind of bridges the gap as far as how I acquired some of that information. But as far as the things that we're talking about now, a lot of it's just, reflection, and then working with kids going forward and seeing how they find success.
Well, I don't know if the bridges that we left out, that you you played underneath Tom Brady, the GOAT, or Bill Belichick, the greatest coach in NFL history, or whether it's that you struggled through the NFL and went from team to team to team, and found yourself in different cultures and different coaches, and we could spend another hour, I'm sure, talking about that whole part of it. But what specifically were you getting at when you said there's a piece that we're leaving out?
Well, yeah. So, you mentioned struggling and bouncing around from team to team. And, I can look back at, where I was at different points in my career and say, like, oh, things were going well at that time, and I was throwing the ball well, or I was throwing the ball better at that time than other times, and feeling more confident. But I think, so I never figured it out, right? I never was able to refine my skill to its previous state or beyond to compete at a super high level in the NFL. And I felt like I had a lot of other attributes that could have lent well to that from a mental perspective and, my interest in the game. I think instincts, I had good instincts out on the field, in the pocket, good feel for the game. I saw it, I understood it, but the physical delivery wasn't always there as far as the football for that level.
Got it.
And so I bounced around. I struggled with that. I ended up finding myself out of football. But at the end of things, like when I was already out of the NFL, and I think even after I played in the Arena League one year, I was always trying, every offseason, I was like studying and trying to figure out, what was the thing going to be that was going to get me back to that level, because I thought no one even, I felt that there was a level I could compete at that people hadn't seen, in a long time. And so I figured the only person that I hadn't really consulted, which is crazy to think about, and I had been consulting him throughout the process, but not really truly asking him to analyze what I was doing and try to figure out a solution. And that was my dad. And my thought was, he's coached me and watched me since I was a kid. And he would often mention to me, even after I got hurt in high school, that, something doesn't look right, but we never could come up with a solution. And a lot of times he was trying to stay out of it and not be overbearing or not get in, in the way of what I was doing. So I think he thought, he's in good hands at Michigan or wherever I was. And ultimately, when it was almost basically all over, I went to him and said, hey, I'm at the end here. There's only one thing that's going to really revive my career, allow me to keep on competing. And that's if I can figure something out that's going to help me throw the ball better again, at least better than I had been at a higher level. And so he took it upon himself, and never been a professional coach, but I would put him up there with the best coaches that I've had. And looking back, especially at how he would analyze talent and get the best out of people and all that, and figure out techniques. And so he went through whatever his own methodology was, and he came up with an idea of, hey, when you look at a quarterback, the best passers, the best throwers, and, we're looking at Elway and Marino and Montana and then, Favre and Brady and some of the guys through those eras that he had been a fan. He's like, their body all works the same. They all look different, but they all have a human body, and the human body generally works the same, right? We might look different due to, longer levers, taller stature, different build or whatever. But when you look at a home run hitter at the point of impact, you can point to multiple things in the body that are all in identical position, in identical timing. And so he didn't necessarily come to me with an answer of how I could achieve that, but he said, hey, the best passers are in these positions.
That's what you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
It's all right.
That was the starting point. And it took me, I would say a couple, maybe a year plus, maybe more, before I could even figure out like how I would move my body and kind of get into those positions or get close. And, by that time, a lot of time had passed, and it was, hard for me to break back in at the trajectory that I wanted to get on. So I decided I needed to move on with life and get into other things. But I started working with kids with this new information that I had. And so, I think it's, my understanding of that information and how to teach it and translate and all that, I think has developed, 100x since that time, but that was the beginning of it. And
your dad seems like now, a really cool dude.
Like I mentioned, my understanding has really developed, and I think I have a really good idea of how the body works to make those movements now. And that's where a lot of my reflection has come, is in developing that understanding and looking back and going, man, I was way off. I was literally working myself in the opposite direction of where I needed to be going, which is pretty amazing to think about. But luckily, I think I have a good understanding of it now, and I'm able to, I encounter a lot of kids that I think are getting led in that direction that I was going, and I'm able to say, hey, maybe you try something else. Let's look at what we're doing here and how your body's moving, and let's not listen to all the things you're being told by the gurus and social media, but let's look at the guys who are doing it the best at the highest level, because that requires maximum efficiency.
Right? And I've had the opportunity to go.
I think Pat Mahomes is the easiest one to look at, or you could look at other guys like Tom or Roethlisberger, who's a big, strong guy in stature, and I always tell the kids, I have that stature too, but I couldn't throw like those guys in the NFL because I wasn't using my body efficiently and correctly, in my opinion. So it can really make a difference of, like I tell the kids, hey, this guy's going to be a starter in varsity in his high school team, or maybe he never plays. And it can be that big of a difference in terms of the output that you can get with your body if you use it right. So that's kind of the bridge that I was talking about, was kind of the discovery that my dad made as far as, where I was kind of missing and being in bad position.
Well, I was saying your dad sounds like a really cool dude, and maybe we should get him on the radio show. Is he? It sounds like he's very thoughtful, and obviously the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The experience that you're having with your after pro career, involving yourself with young athletes. You
guys there?
Yeah, we're here. Can you not hear me? Did you put us on mute or no? I don't know. I was just talking about how great your dad sounds.
Can you hear us now, Matt?
Yeah. Did you guys get me back?
Yeah, we got you.
Now we're back. Yeah,
we heard everything you said there.
So. Yeah, we did.
Bill, just reset your question.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just saying what an incredible guy your dad is. Maybe we should get him on the show.
He'd be fun. He'd have a lot to say about it, I'm sure.
I'm sure he would, and obviously his passion for you, but trying to figure it out, and a lot of times parents are out there trying to figure it out, and they do hear the wrong things from the wrong people, and they do. I'm sure there's times when you don't have any hair to pull out, but you're just like, God, the messages are all mixed up here. Why are we driving our kids in this direction? In your work with kids now, and what you're finding with, you mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and you mentioned, there, I see this Jalen Daniels, what he was able to do in his rookie year, and you can just kind of see it. You can kind of see he's got that swagger, he's got that decision-making ability, whether it comes from video games or whatever. To you, is it a whole different deal, or is it the same deal just done differently?
As far as their ability to play?
Yeah, just the way they play the game, the way Lamar plays it, the way Patrick Mahomes plays it. I mean, obviously, Josh Allen is kind of setting your mold. I mean, he's kind of that strong, moose of a guy with a strong arm, but he's super smart and makes good decisions. And you were super smart and made good decisions. But is this age of quarterback because of video games and because of their ability to read defenses and because of the advances in their biometrics and all that stuff? Do you sense that it's different? Is that the advantage that they have, or what do you think?
Well, I want to be clear about something. The guys you mentioned are way better athletes than I was, especially movement-wise.
Yeah.
Their ability to run is just unbelievable, and I think it's a wonderful advancement for the game to see athletes like that playing quarterback.
Gotcha.
I only wish that I could run like that. So,
okay.
And I don't know. I think there's a much deeper story there and, history there as far as why we're seeing different types of athletes playing quarterback now. And
sure.
Guys that are really, all around athletes. It's not the first time, right? We saw guys like Steve Young that were great runners back in the day, but it seems to be a lot more prominent now. And I think with the rule changes and the scheme changes and passing being so much more a part of the game, and then the quarterback run pass options. I mean, it's built for these guys, and it's super fun to watch. I don't know how well I would have been able to execute, especially with the running part of it. But when I look at it, I look at the running piece and the scheme piece, and I think, what awesome innovations for the game, right? It just shows you that what the level of competition is, that people have to keep pushing and keep discovering new ways to execute and win. I think it's awesome. As far as the passing part and the execution part of that, and I'm speaking from the outside because I haven't been in a quarterback room for many years now, but when I watch the game, I actually don't see a difference. I think it comes back to the fundamentals of playing the position, right? Of understanding what your side's doing, understanding the defense, and having the knowledge and the training to efficiently move in the pocket, work yourself through a progression, and then deliver the ball to the right guy on time. And I think those principles haven't changed from the way that I was taught to play the position and the way that I observed other great players, whether they were in my room or on my team or on the other side, playing the game. So I think those fundamentals are everlasting. And those are things that I think you can teach an 8 or 9-year-old kid, or maybe even younger. I was worked out a 7-year-old a couple of months ago, which was pretty fun. But I mean, I'm telling you, I teach kids the drills that I did every day in college or in the pros, and the concepts of footwork and progression, reading a progression, and then, you know, getting into delivering the ball. But yeah, I think those fundamentals, I don't think they change.
Well, I love it.
Right.
You offer real, raw, and insightful reflections of what it takes to be a high-level athlete, and also overcome adversity and fight through the highs and the lows of football at all the levels, right?
Right.
And,
you know, one thing I've been curious about, Matt, you know, when you were with the Patriots, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you had yourself, you had Matt Castle, and then Tom Brady, like all California guys. Yeah. How was it being, you know, in the room with those guys? Because, you know, they must have known, you know, you from your days at De La Salle, and I think maybe Castle went to Mater Dei, and, you know, Brady was from Northern California as well. But I mean, how, maybe like a quick story about how it was being in those room with those guys?
Yeah, no, there was a lot of common threads there, and you know, Tom and I grew up in the Bay Area, and then, of course, both went to Michigan, although we missed each other by a year or two there. And then Matt, I think I had met Matt. He's a couple years older than me, but I had met him when we were back in high school, you know, around some events. And so there was a lot of commonalities there, a lot of things that we shared. And, of course, being up there in the Northeast, away from California. But I think in general, like when I think back on, you know, to my time with those guys, it's really two things. One, on the personal side, just solid guys, right? I mean, just really, really good human beings. And that made it a pleasant experience to spend a lot of time with them. We always had a good time bantering and, you know, all those things. So just on a personal level, it was really, really a pleasant experience. And then on a professional level or a sports level, first of all, the level of ability and skill that each of them had, different skill sets, I would say, but just physically very gifted. And then, you know, character-wise and mentality-wise, just the ultimate competitors. Everything we did was a competition, in the most positive way. You know, we pushed each other, we challenged each other. I think Tom was already 8 years in the league and three Super Bowl rings, and he wasn't above competing with us every day. He expected us to push him and challenge him and try to beat him. Yeah. And just from that regard, it was like all the things that you hear a quarterback is supposed to do or supposed to be, as far as being an example, being the first guy in, putting, you know, it's very cliche now, you know, doing the work or putting in the work, but I experienced it and did it right alongside those guys. Right. And so I always, when people ask about it, I say, you know, what was Tom like, or what was it like being there with Matt and Tom? It's like, you know, it's like talking about my family so much. It's right. Like, maybe people think this is a little bit cringe, but that's kind of what, you know, if I'm working with a kid, I'm going to tell him, hey, you don't know who I am, right? You never see me play on TV. Don't listen to me because I'm Matt. I want to be able to point to somebody like Tom or somebody like Matt Castle, who you've seen on TV, or somebody like Pat, who's playing now, doing things the right way, being a great example on the field, but also personally, and say, you know, let's look at those guys as the example because it's tangible. You can see it right now in front of you. I think those guys were just a great example of that.
Right.
Well, Matt, I'm struck by your humility. It's awesome, and you seem like just somebody I could really hang out with and have fun with. And I hope I get a chance to meet you. Yeah, it's been a great show. I think we went in a direction that I didn't expect, and I kind of figured that was what was going to happen. You know, this show is all about physical activity and exercise and how good it is for us. It seems like you keep yourself in pretty good shape. Do you have a regimen, a routine that you go through that you keep yourself moving your body in the right ways today?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's probably the most important thing in my life, if I'm being honest. I think, the pandemic gave a lot of us time to reflect on those things, right? And how we were going to move and, were we going to get outside and get sun and all those things. And I think it's worth mentioning that, one of the things that I realized I missed the most about playing and being a part of football, and it was stuff that I never thought about and never understood that was vital to my health, just as a human being, because I had been doing it my whole life without thinking about it, right? I just chased the things that I was interested in. And if I was bored, I'd go outside and shoot hoops out in the sun, or go run around and throw the ball around or something. And so I think some of those things that sports offers us, as far as getting our feet in the grass and getting in the sun and getting fresh air, you don't think about the mental health benefits of that. And getting into the professional, the corporate world, working in an office, spending a lot of time on the road here in the Bay Area commuting, like I started to realize how valuable those things are to me, and that now I need to be very intentional about incorporating those things into my life and into my weekly schedule. So I try to move my body every day. At minimum, I go for a walk, multiple walks, get outside the office and get some sun. I try to get in the gym and get resistance training in, 3 to 4 times a week still. And then, maybe 1 or 2 days I'll get out and run just some interval sprints. I don't feel like I'm, it feels like the wheels are out of alignment a little bit most of the time, but
I do know what that feels like. I love it.
Yeah. But I'm totally believe in moving the body, and not just for the physical part of it, but for the mental part of it. And I think it's really great to see, based on what you guys are doing with the technology, what Doug's doing, and really just the coverage, or the understanding and the promotion of what it means to be healthy, and how we need to be very intentional about moving ourselves, and what that can do for us, even for just clarity of thought, right? When you're trying to solve a problem, or maybe you're nervous about, like in my daily life, getting on a call with a client or something. And a lot of us go for a walk, or we need to walk around the office while we're talking, just to kind of work that out a little bit. So I think, it's said often now, but sitting is the new smoking, right? Being still is not our friend.
Exactly right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and subscribe and share it as you see fit, especially with someone like me who loves football. We're in this age of this Chiefs dynasty and what's happening. It's great to hear the story of perseverance that Matt told us, and I think this is something that other people could get a benefit from. So share it out there for us. Follow Movement is the Medicine on LinkedIn and in our YouTube channel, and you'll hear more inspiring stories about athletes, coaches, and leaders, and you'll hear more from our expert, Dr. Doug, on how to move your body correctly and why it's so important, right?
Right. Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Matt, thanks so much. Great having you.
Thank you, guys. This was a blast. Thank you.
Dance like nobody's watching.